Now, we're not going to deal with the entire planes of the face. We're just going to talk about the simple planes that make up the nose. Much more simplified plane that make up the nose. So when you go to a site like this, you can actually see in 3D the simple structure from different angles, and this will help you to actually understand how the structure works and what it would look like whenever light is hitting a particular plane of the face. So Andrew Loomis has these planes. He has the basic plane and then the secondary plane, and this is the basic plane, and whenever you're drawing you can always identify this simple plane on anybody's face, and it's going to help with light direction. You can also use the arrowhead to look at how planes help with the movement of shadows across the face. So when we are talking about the simple plane of the nose, we're talking about a simple shape, right? Ideally it's 4 planes. You're looking at this area now. This area is darker, this area is darker, and this area is lighter, but this area is also showing some levels of shadow, because this area represents like the bridge of the nose, and sunlight is showing on this area. If it were here, if the sunlight were here, you would discover that this area would be darker, or this area would receive a little bit more darkness, but it will be brighter. So the things about planes is that it just breaks down complex forms into much more simple. It's like a low poly rendering of the human face, so it just simplifies everything. So this plane right here is what is going to help with the positioning of the nose on the face, and it is basically the simple structure. The exercise I will do in cases like this is I'll try to draw the head, but I'll focus more on the nose, and the goal here is to try to remind myself of this shape and these angles, how they look, and it will help me interpret that to real photos whenever I'm looking at them. So I'm just going to draw this simplified. The nose usually aligns with the ear. People have different ears, of course, but the nose usually aligns with the ear. In different angles. So I look at structures like this, 3D structures like this, and I use that to get the basic, a much more defined structure of the nose with more planes. If you're finding the nose a bit difficult to draw, you can try to get this Andrew Loomis 3D sculpture. It's going to help you break down the face, and you discover that once you figure out how to draw this structure of the face, you can also apply it. It will help with the simple positioning of the nose and any other facial feature that you're dealing with. And despite the fact that my art has improved over the years, I still have to come back to basics and fundamentals like this, because they help to refresh my memory on it. And most times I could be drawing and I could have difficulty with drawing an angle. Like you see angles like this, bottom side view, sometimes they could give me an issue. And coming back to something like this is really going to help me figure out how to place the nose, the mouth, the ear in these angles. So I would highly advise that you learn this basic, or at least memorize this basic placement and positioning of the nose. The next thing we're going to look at, we're going to do an anatomy breakdown of the nose. So if you check out previous videos, I talk about studying the skull a lot. In the previous video where I talked about understanding, where I talked about the practices and exercises that I usually do to improve my drawing of the face and the human head in general, one of the exercises that I did there was drawing the skull. And drawing the skull, or doing studies of the human skull, is very important because they actually help you to understand the placement of the nose, the eyes, the mouth, the teeth, and the mechanics and the mechanical movement of each part of the body. Once you look at the skull, you begin to intuitively see the distance between the eyes, how the jaw moves in the mouth, and you begin to ask yourself a question as to why there is this hole at the skull, right? This hole at the skull, you begin to ask yourself this question: why there is a gap here at this area of the skull? And that is because a large makeup of the nose is simply cartilage. If we were to look at the skull from the side view, we'll see that the nose actually starts from here, this area here, and that is the nasal bone. You can try to feel like that area, that gap between the two sockets, your two eyeballs. You can feel that there is that fleshy area, and you feel that area is much more harder than the rest of your nose. That uppermost area here is much more harder than the rest of your nose, and this is because it is part of the skull, right? It is pure bone, and then the rest of the nose is mostly cartilage. So when we move down our nose here, we'll discover that this part here is mostly cartilage. When we look at the normal nose, you see that nose is divided into sections. The first section is the nasal bone. This top area over here, there's a gap over the nose. It's usually referred to as the keystone area. This triangular looking gap over here is usually referred to as the keystone glabella. And once you move downwards, we have the upper and lower. We have the nasal bone here. This area here is the upper cartilage, and this area here is the lower cartilage. We have the wings. Then we have the wings, and then finally the nostrils. Then we have the wings and nostrils. Rather than memorizing these anatomical features, what you simply need to understand is planes. Yeah, so I'm going to bring back the planes of the nose again. Now look at this here. Instead of memorizing the nasal bone and all of those complex names, it is just simple to understand the planes, right? And this is going to help you to be able to draw any single nose you see, because in as much as we may have and we may look different as humans, and we may have, different types of nose, broad nose, pug nose, Nubian nose, whatever type of nose you may have, when you break everything down, you're going to see that everybody has the same anatomical features, right? We all have the same anatomical feature, and that is why when you look at a breakdown like this, like a 3D structure like this, it's much more easier for you to understand how the nose looks. So over here we have our keystone area, and then this second plane over here is what is the nasal bone. The next plane represents the upper cartilage, and then this plane represents the lower cartilage, or some people call it the ball. Not some people, we all call it the ball of the nose. This lower plane over here we have the septum, and then we have the wings of the nose. When you actually look at it, it all begins to make sense. When you look at a real nose like this, you begin to see all these areas of the nose. which I personally think is an overly dignified term for something that brings out mucus. But anyways, we have our ball, lower cartilage, and the wings of the nose, and then our philtrum over here. You can see how the structure has just helped me to break down his nose so very easily. The angles are much more easier for me to tackle. Yeah, I didn't talk about this plane over here. This plane over here is the maxilla. Whenever I'm doing studies, I could just do a structure study of the nose, so I could get a person's nose and then put this structure on it. Let me just do it. And so I'll take this shape and then I'm going to copy this shape exactly how it is. It may not be exact, but when I start actually detailing, you're going to see that I'm going to do my own drawing of the nose, because I've placed this plane on top of the nose and I've copied this plane out. My own drawing of the nose is going to be very similar to this, so it's going to serve as a guide to what I'm drawing. So that is one way to actually study the nose. Once you've understood this structure, then you can place this structure on top of different nose in different angles, and then copy those structures. Wait, I forgot to mention this, but another way I'll be approaching the plane, rather than just this box shape, I would also go back to my cone. So draw a cone, and then we'll have our ball, and then our upper and lower cartilage. This is the ball, upper and lower cartilage, and then we'll have our wings. And then our keystone plane. So you could approach it from this angle and use this format to tackle whatever nose it is that you're drawing. But if you are actively trying to improve noses you draw, what I would suggest is that you take these planes that I've introduced you to, go to these sites, go to Sketchfab, and then draw these noses, these planes, in different angles. Draw them in different angles, bottom view, top view, draw them in different angles so that you can familiarize yourself with this structure. And then whilst you're doing that, you can then get some actual real life noses. You can take picture of yourself, of your own nose, and then use that to practice. Click on the notification bell to know when I drop a new video. And I want you to remember that it takes time to actually get good at anything. Be patient with yourself while still applying consistent effort. If this helped, please hit that like button, subscribe for more drawing breakdowns, and most importantly, go draw something right after this video. Stay creative, guys.